Welcome back to the deep dive, where we take the complexity of modern financial life and really try to cut right to the painful, essential truth.
And today, that truth is a tough one.
It really is. Today, we are staring directly at the American paycheck, that number you see on your annual review, and we're asking a very uncomfortable, almost universal question.
Why does almost everyone feel financially trapped?
Exactly. Perpetually playing catch up, even when you're making what sounds like a decent, a solid middle class income.
It's the central financial paradox of our generation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
On paper, you look at the data, and incomes have technically risen. We have charts for that.
Right.
But then you talk to an actual person, an average American household, and the feeling isn't stability or prosperity. It's this deep, persistent financial dread.
A low-grade hum of anxiety.
Yes, and the numbers back this feeling up. There's a fundamental dislocation between what people earn and the percentage of that income they are actually able to hold on to save or invest.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really get a grip on the squeeze, we have to define our subject, the average American dollar, so to speak.
We have to set a baseline.
We do. And we're starting with the raw data from the Census Bureau for 2023. So, what does the American financial middle actually look like on paper?
Well, our benchmark here is the median, not the average. And the median U.S. household income stands right around $70,000 a year.
70,000. And for an individual,
If you're looking at a single worker, that median drops to roughly somewhere between $45,000 and $55,000 annually.
so for this deep dive, that $70,000 household is our main character.
That's our focal point. And, for a lot of listeners, especially if you're outside a major coastal city, that number, it sounds comfortable. It sounds okay.
It should be. Historically, $70,000 was a bedrock middle-class salary. It afforded a specific, predictable quality of life.
And that's the emotional hook right there. That number should translate into stability. It should mean you can handle an emergency, say for retirement.
But it doesn't. We know from every consumer sentiment survey out there that that feeling of stability has just vanished.
Vanished is the right word. And that's why our mission today is, well, it's almost forensic.
Forensic, I like that.
We need to take an average dollar earned by that median household and trace its journey. Where does it actually go before it ever has a chance to hit a retirement account?
We're hunting for what you call the silent drains.
Exactly. The mandatory, often systemic costs, and the insidious behavioral spending habits that all work together to turn a $70,000 gross salary into a zero or even a negative balance 2 weeks before the next paycheck.
And a crucial point here, one we have to stress, is that this isn't about blaming individuals. It's not a story of mass recklessness.
No, not at all. The sources are very clear on this. What we're seeing is a systemic shift in how money has to be allocated. The rules of the game have fundamentally changed since, say, the 1980s.
The stress is structural.
Absolutely. And that leads to the initial shock factor, the big misconception that traps millions of people. It's the belief that if I just earn more, I'll automatically save more.
Oh, that's a big one. The if-only trap. If only I get that promotion.
Precisely. People chase promotions, they take on second jobs, they freelance,
Hmm.
all driven by this idea. But the overwhelming behavioral evidence shows something else entirely.
That earning more just leads to spending more.
It leads to a proportional or sometimes even an overproportional spending increase. It's a vicious treadmill where the speed just keeps increasing, often faster than your ability to run.
Okay, so let's get into the structure of that spending. Let's look at the pie chart. We're pulling from the Bureau of Labor Statistics data for the 2023-24 Consumer Expenditure Survey. This is the modern reality.
This is the blueprint of where the money goes before you even think about aggressive savings goals.
Yeah.
It's a required spending.
And leading the charge, no surprise, is housing. But what's shocking is the sheer percentage it commands now.
It's massive.
We're talking between 32% and 35% of the average household's gross income. It's the single largest expense, and it dictates everything else.
It's the gatekeeper. I mean, think about that. When over a third of your paycheck is committed before you even buy a single meal, the math starts working against you immediately.
Immediately. Okay, what's next?
Next up, you have transportation. This is essential for almost everyone in the U.S., and it's eating up a huge 15% to 18%.
And then food, which covers both groceries and dining out, is sitting at around 12% to 14%.
So let's just pause right there. Just those three categories, shelter, mobility, and sustenance, now demand about 60 to 65% of the entire gross budget.
65%. And we haven't even talked about taxes or
Right.
health care or, actually saving money.
Not yet. And speaking of mandatory expenses, that brings us to healthcare. It's a crushing 8% to 10% of the budget, and that's for premiums and out-of-pocket costs,
Then you've got this category, insurance and pension savings. It's kind of depressing how small it is. It only clocks in at a meager 6% to 8%.
which is not enough. It's
Yeah.
just not. And that remaining 15% to 20%, that's where everything else in life gets crammed.
Entertainment, education, childcare, clothes, personal care.
All of it. And here's the real kicker. The moment you calculate required taxes, federal, state payroll taxes, which can easily absorb another 20% to 25% of that $70,000 gross income.
The budget is already broken.
It's functionally insolvent for any kind of meaningful savings.
Yeah.
The numbers just don't add up.
So here's where it gets, for me, really interesting. You look at those modern percentages and you just kind of assume that's how it's always been. It feels normal.
Right, it's our reality.
But when you apply the historical contrast our sources provide, specifically data from the 1980s, you realize the ground has shifted beneath our feet.
It's a structural earthquake. The sources show that in the 1980s, housing was only consuming about 22% to 25% of the average income.
22%, that's a 10-point difference. It's huge.
It's a world of difference. And transportation was also lower, around 12%. Interestingly, food costs proportionally were a bit higher back then, maybe around 15%.
Why was that?
Mostly because we spent less on prepared foods and dining out.
Yeah.
The supply chain was different. So a larger portion of the food budget was, raw ingredients for home cooking.
So food has stayed relatively stable or even gone down slightly as a percentage. But the massive inflation, the huge cost shift, happened in the two categories that really determine whether you can build wealth.
Shelter and mobility.
Housing costs have just ballooned by nearly 10 to 12 percentage points as a share of income.
And that is the critical implication. The cost of just having the basics of a middle-class life, a place to live and a way to get to work, has inflated dramatically compared to income.
That extra 10% going to housing and the extra, 3 to 6 points for transportation?
Yeah.
That's not trivial.
It's everything. Mathematically, that is the difference between having a financial safety net and being perpetually stuck paycheck to paycheck.
Hold on, let me play devil's advocate for a second. Couldn't that just be market evolution? Maybe we're spending more on housing because we're demanding bigger houses now or better amenities. Are we sure it isn't just lifestyle inflation on a grand scale?
That's a really astute question, and the data actually handles that skepticism beautifully. Yes, the average square footage of a new home has increased. That's true.
Okay.
But the primary drivers of this cost shift are structural, not just discretionary demand. We're talking about huge systemic shifts.
Like what?
Like chronic wage stagnation since the 1980s when compared to asset inflation. And housing is the primary asset. We're talking about restrictive zoning laws in high-opportunity areas that limit supply and drive up prices.
So we can't build enough new housing where people need to live.
Exactly. And there's been a massive shift toward an auto-dependent suburban sprawl, which locks in that higher 15–18% transportation spend. This wasn't an accident. It was a slow-motion rebalancing of the entire economy.
And the result of that rebalancing is what you call the savings drain.
Precisely. If people were paying 22% for housing in the 70s and 80s, they had this natural structural buffer of disposable income built right into their budget.
And the savings rate reflected that.
It did. The savings rate today is low. It's hovering around 6 to 7%. Now compare that to the 1970s and 80s when savings rates were consistently in the 10 to 12% range.
So where did that 5% difference in income go?
It didn't just vanish into thin air. It got absorbed by those now mandatory high fixed expenses, primarily housing and transportation. The financial stability that was once afforded by that 10–12% savings buffer has been structurally eroded.
Okay, let's dive deep into these two categories then. Housing and transportation, they are the foundation of this whole budget structure, and it sounds like if you can't get these two right, nothing else matters.
That's pretty much it. No fancy investment strategy, no amount of coupon clipping is going to fix the underlying issue if these two are out of whack.
So let's start with the big one, housing, the budget destroyer.
It's the budget destroyer because it's the largest and most inflexible monthly payment you have. When 32 to 35% of your income is just gone right off the top, that sets a hostile, precarious tone for the rest of your financial life.
And to make this hyper real, let's do the granular math for our $70,000 median household. This is where the income starts to vanish before a bill is even paid.
Okay, so a household earns $70,000 gross. Before you even think about income tax, they're paying 7.65% in payroll taxes. That's Social Security and Medicare.
So that's $5,355 gone instantly.
Instantly. Then let's assume a pretty moderate effective federal and state tax rate. Let's say 15% combined, which is conservative, with standard deductions, that's another $10,500.
So just like that, your $70,000 gross income is now functionally about $54,145 net.
Or roughly $4,512 net. That's the actual money you have to work with.
$4,512. Okay, now let's bring in the housing costs. The hard numbers here are they're painful. The average U.S. rent in 2024 is approximately $1,958 per month.
Do the math on that. $1,958 out of a take-home pay of $4,512 is 43.4%.
43%, not the 30% everyone tells you.
Not 30%, not even 35%. 43% of your take-home pay. This is why financial stress is the default state for so many people. Millions of Americans are functionally priced out of the traditional safe zone for housing.
And in major cities, the sources confirm this ratio just skyrockets. You're often looking at 34 to 40% of your gross median income just for rent.
And that ratio is what traps people in the renting cycle. It creates this compounding ownership challenge.
How so?
Well, because the rent is so high, 43% of your net income. It makes saving for a down payment incredibly difficult. That 6% national savings rate is nowhere near enough to keep up with the rate of inflation in housing prices.
So you can't save because rent is too high, but you have to keep renting because you can't save.
It's a classic catch-22. Then you layer on high mortgage rates, soaring property taxes, rising insurance costs. The dream of homeownership, which was once the key mechanism for building middle-class wealth, just feels increasingly unattainable.
Okay, so if housing is the biggest lever, optimizing it has the biggest impact, what are the strategic solutions the sources offer? We have to get beyond just find a cheaper apartment.
Right, because most people can't just negotiate market rent down. So the solutions focus on changing your relationship with the cost structure itself. The first key tactical option is house hacking.
House hacking. It sounds like something from Silicon Valley, but it's really a very old idea.
It's an old idea with a new name. It's simply using your property to generate income that offsets your own housing expenses. And it goes beyond just getting a roommate.
So what does that look like in practice?
We're talking about a few main strategies. One, buying a duplex or a fourplex. You can often get an FHA loan for this with a low down payment. You live in one unit and you rent out the others. Ideally, the rent from the other units covers your entire mortgage.
So your housing cost drops to zero, or close to it.
Exactly. Another way is utilizing accessory dwelling units or ADUs, a carriage house, a basement apartment. You can use that for long-term rental income or even short-term, like on Airbnb.
The math on that is just astonishing. If you can take your housing burden from 43% of your net income down to, say, 15% or even 0%, the stability that creates is enormous. You're freeing up over $1,500 a month.
That is the quickest way to recreate that historical 10-12% savings buffer instantly.
What's the second strategy?
The second key strategy is geographic arbitrage. This is especially powerful now with the rise of remote work.
Taking your big city salary to a low cost of living area.
Precisely. If your job can be done from anywhere, you are essentially buying mobility freedom. Why pay nearly $2,000 for rent in a high-cost area when you could pay $1,200 in a place where the rent-to-income ratio is much, much safer?
That $800 difference goes straight into your savings and wealth-building accounts without you having to earn a single penny more.
It requires flexibility and maybe a sacrifice of some urban amenities, but the financial leverage you gain is immediate and powerful.
All right, let's move to transportation. The average American is spending 15 to 18% of their income here. And this is another one of those fixed costs that feels optional until it's not.
It becomes mandatory very quickly. Our infrastructure, outside of a few dense cities, demands car ownership for most people to function.
And this is where the stats get really shocking, because we aren't just paying for gas and insurance, we're paying for a depreciating asset that is basically a hole in your financial bucket.
That's a perfect way to put it. Unpacking the transportation drain it's sobering. The average new car payment in 2024 is a staggering $739 per month.
$739. And the loan terms are getting longer and longer, right? People are taking out 6-7 year loans just to make that payment seem manageable.
They are. And then you have to add in the fuel, the maintenance, the escalating insurance costs, and the silent killer of wealth, depreciation.
So what's the all-in cost?
The total annual cost of owning a car now approaches $9,000 a year per vehicle.
$9,000. That's nearly 13% of our median $70,000 household income for just one car.
Right. And if that household has two cars, which is the reality in many suburban and rural areas, you are absolutely maxing out and probably exceeding that 15 to 18% category.
You could be spending $18,000 a year just to get around.
And this creates what we call the $10,000 mistake. It's this hidden wealth drain of buying a new car every 5 years or so.
Yeah.
That rapid cyclical depreciation is one of the most effective ways to guarantee the middle class does not build wealth.
Can we just break down that depreciation curve just to make
Yeah.
it really concrete for people?
Sure, a brand new car loses about 10% of its value the second you drive it off the lot. It's gone. It loses another 10% in the first year,
So you're down 20% in year
at
one.
least. By year 5, that car has lost roughly 60% of its original value. So you're paying $739 a month for 5 years. That's over $44,000 in total payments to drive an asset that is actively destroying that wealth.
Whereas if you buy a 3-year-old used car,
Someone else has already paid for that catastrophic initial drop. The vehicle holds its value much more stably over the next 5 years of your ownership.
what's fascinating here and what drives those high payments is the psychology of it. We need to analyze that mindset shift. Are Americans paying for mobility or are they paying for status?
It's so often status dressed up as a mobility need. If the goal is purely to get from point A to point B, a reliable used vehicle works perfectly. You could spend, say, $300 a month for that.
Right.
If your payment is $739, that extra $439 a month isn't for transportation. It's paying for the new car smell, the latest tech, the leather seats, and the perception of success.
And that extra money is an express ticket right off the savings train.
It guarantees you will burn through your entire transportation budget and then some. So the core tactical alternative has to be reducing your consumption of depreciation.
Meaning, buy used cars.
Exactly. Prioritize used cars, specifically those that are 3 to 5 years old. Let someone else take that massive initial financial hit. And secondly, where it's feasible, and we know this is tough in many places, maximize public transport, cycling, carpooling, anything to reduce or eliminate that $739 monthly payment.
If you could cut that monthly car payment and its related costs, you're freeing up nearly $9,000 a year.
And that $9,000 isn't just budget relief. That's enough money to fully fund an IRA for the year. It's enough to significantly boost your 401k. Or, crucially, it's enough to aggressively pay down high-interest debt, which brings us to our next section.
Okay, so we've established that the two biggest fixed costs, shelter and movement, have basically eaten the historical savings buffer.
They've swallowed it whole.
Now we turn to what you call the triple threat of mandatory stressors: debt, healthcare, and insurance. These are the categories that don't just consume your monthly income, they actively compound financial stress.
They do, through crushing interest rates and unexpected bills. And these categories are all intrinsically linked. Because your fixed costs are so high, you're living too close to the margin to absorb any kind of financial shock.
So you have no emergency fund.
Exactly. So when the inevitable happens, a major dental bill, a car repair, a sudden job loss, people have no choice but to turn to high-interest credit card debt.
And the debt reality is startling. The data shows that 61% of Americans carry credit card debt, meaning they don't pay off their balance in full every month.
And the average balance for those who carry it is about $6,200.
That average balance is just an anchor on your financial progress, especially with interest rates now. They're often over 20%, sometimes 25% APR.
Let's make that compounding real. Let's say you have that $6,200 balance at 22% interest. If you only make the minimum payment, which is usually around 2% of the balance, so maybe $124,
How long does it take to pay off?
you will be paying on that debt for nearly 15 years, and you will pay back more than $14,000 in total.
So you paid more in interest than the original amount you borrowed.
Far more. The high interest costs don't just prevent you from saving, they actively claw back any progress you manage to make elsewhere.
And then you layer on top of that the unavoidable nature of healthcare costs, that 8 to 10% of the budget.
Right. And even if you have good insurance through your employer, the financial shock absorbers are often missing.
Let's break that down. The median annual premium for employee coverage is staggering. It's around $7,911.
And that's money that's spent before you receive any actual medical care. It's just the price of admission. But what really pushes the spending higher are the deductibles and the out-of-pocket maximums.
But the story of the unexpected medical bill, I think almost every American can relate to that.
And the data shows that for 28% of Americans, a surprise medical bill leads them straight into debt. You might budget for your 8% premium, but a sudden $3,000 deductible for an emergency room visit that completely derails your entire financial plan.
And forces you onto that high-interest credit card we just talked about, which starts the spiral.
It's a vicious cycle. It shows that even small fluctuations in your health can create a compounding financial crisis because your fixed costs are already too high.
So, given how high stakes this is, what's the actionable advice from the sources? We need a proactive, aggressive defense.
First and foremost, Prioritize aggressive debt payoff. Mathematically, paying off high-interest debt is the highest guaranteed return on your money you can possibly get.
What do you mean by that?
If you're paying 25% APR on a credit card, any dollar you put toward paying that balance down is earning you a guaranteed 25% return because you're preventing that future interest payment. No stock market investment can guarantee that.
And for people who need a structured plan, the sources talk about two main methods, right? The debt snowball and the debt avalanche.
Correct. The debt avalanche is the mathematically optimal choice. You focus all your extra money on the debt with the highest interest rate first, no matter the size of the balance.
So you're saving the most money on interest over time.
Exactly. The debt snowball is more behavioral. You pay off the smallest balance first, regardless of the interest rate. This gives you a quick win, which creates psychological momentum and motivation to keep going.
Both work, but the avalanche is technically better for your wallet.
Right. The second strategic move is to leverage the tools designed specifically to mitigate those healthcare costs, particularly health savings accounts or HSAs.
HSAs are so powerful, but I feel like they're still widely misunderstood.
They are. We have to give the HSA the attention it deserves. If you have a qualified high-deductible health plan, an HSA provides a triple tax advantage.
Okay, break that down.
1. The money you put in is tax-free. It's pre-tax. 2. It grows inside the account tax-free. And 3. It comes out tax-free as long as it's for qualified medical expenses.
So it's essentially a tax-free vehicle to cover those exact high out-of-pocket costs and deductibles that push people into debt.
Precisely. You are investing money specifically to cover that inevitable $3,000 medical emergency 5 years from now, and that money has grown completely outside of the tax system. It's a game changer.
Okay, so we've established that fixed costs are higher than ever, and these mandatory stressors like debt and healthcare compound the problem. But let's shift gears. Let's assume someone manages to navigate all of that.
Okay.
They live in a moderately priced area, they drive a used car, they paid off their credit cards. Why do people making $100,000 or even $150,000 a year still feel broke?
This is the big reveal. This is where we talk about the silent assassin, lifestyle creep.
The silent assassin, I love that.
It's the behavioral psychological element that ensures that the moment your income goes up, your perceived necessities immediately expand to fill that new space. It negates the advantage of earning more.
And it's not just a catchy phrase. This is the core behavioral problem that prevents wealth building for so many people who are, on paper, doing well.
It sneaks up on your budget, often disguised as self-care or convenience or I deserve this.
And the data on this is wild. We're not talking about buying yachts. We're talking about small, recurring expenses and impulse buys.
The cumulative drain. The data estimates that for many households, this adds up to about $400 to $600 a month, completely unnoticed.
Wait, $400 to $600 a month? That's massive. That's over $7,200 a year just disappearing into the ether.
Think about what you could do with an extra $7,200 a year. That's enough to fully fund an HSA, make a huge dent in that average credit card debt, or make a major strategic choice.
And that's why it's the silent assassin. It's not one big hit. It doesn't hit you with a single painful $2,000 rent hike.
No, it hits you with a dozen tiny charges across the month, a forgotten streaming service for $15, the daily gourmet coffee for $7, the third food delivery order of the week for $50.
And by the end of the month, the $600 is gone and you have no idea where it went. You just know your bank account is low again.
Precisely. And we had to dive into the psychological traps that make this happen because they're so deeply rooted in our modern habits.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the social comparison trap. This is the urge to overspend just to keep up with a perceived peer group. And social media has put this on steroids.
Oh, absolutely. It's a highlight reel of everyone else's spending.
Exactly. Whether it's buying new clothes for every season, taking specific destination vacations, eating at trendy restaurants, the spending is driven by identity and status signaling, not actual need.
And since everyone's posting their best life, the pressure to conform is constant and subtle,
The second trap is the phenomenon of frictionless spending.
making it too easy to spend money.
Way too easy. Mobile payments, one-click ordering, save credit cards on every website, buy now, pay later schemes. They completely remove the cognitive pain of parting with your cash.
There's no physical exchange. You don't hand over bills. You just tap your phone.
So the small purchase doesn't even register as a significant financial transaction. It's death by 1,000 tiny, frictionless cuts. The average person today probably spends money 10 times before lunch without ever touching a physical card.
Which leads right into the third trap, that core misconception we started with.
The belief that a higher income automatically leads to wealth. People increase their lifestyle in lockstep with their income, or, as the data shows, often slightly ahead of it, which ensures they never actually build a buffer.
So this raises an important question. How does identity spending tie into this for the six-figure earner?
Identity spending is spending on things or experiences that signal who you are or who you want to be.
So I'm a person who travels frequently, or I'm a person who only buys organic.
Yes. Or I'm a person who uses the best productivity software. You'll prioritize that spending, even if the fundamental math of your budget can't really support it. This is why someone making $100K can feel just as broke as someone making $50.
They've just expanded their identity spending to a more luxurious level.
Their fixed costs might be the same percentage, but their discretionary wants have ballooned to match their gross income, leaving them with the same zero balance at the end of the month.
The good news is, since this is behavioral, we can use tactical countermeasures to fight back. Where do we start to reverse the creep and get that $600 back?
Control begins with ruthless awareness. The first strategy is the monthly audit. You have to track every recurring subscription and app membership.
Find the forgotten free trials that turned into a permanent $14.99 drain.
Exactly. You have to find where that $400 to $600 is going. Itemize it. Turn the invisible assassin visible.
Then there's the behavioral modification tool for those impulse buys. The simple but incredibly effective 48-hour delay rule.
It's all about reintroducing psychological friction. If you see something you want that isn't an absolute necessity, you must wait a minimum of 48 hours before you buy it.
So it short-circuits that impulse.
It does. It gives your rational financial brain a chance to override the emotional impulse. Most of the time, that urgent need to buy just dissipates, and you save the money.
But the key strategy for permanent change, the sources say, involves automation. You have to structurally block the creep.
Yes. This is the ultimate behavioral fix. You have to automate your wealth building first. Pay yourself first.
So the minute you get paid, money is automatically moved to savings and investment accounts.
Right. If the money's gone from your checking account and moved to a dedicated wealth-building bucket on payday, you can't accidentally spend it on lifestyle creep. It's not there. You're forced to live off the remaining balance.
So let's make this tangible. If we take that $400 a month that was just disappearing and we move it into an automated investment account, what's the compounding wealth impact over, say, a couple of decades?
Okay, let's assume that $400 a month is invested and earns a pretty conservative 7% annual return over time.
So that's $4,800 a year.
Over 20 years, that initial behavioral correction doesn't just equal $96,000 in savings. With compounding, that single decision turns into nearly $210,000.
$210,000 from redirecting the money you were already spending.
That is the difference between retiring comfortably and perpetually worrying about expenses. The seemingly insignificant corrections in your behavioral spending create a massive, compounding wealth impact over time. It's the most powerful way to counteract the high fixed costs we started with.
This has been a necessary but, yeah, an alarming tour of the average American budget.
It's a tough landscape.
The big picture is undeniably clear. Americans are fighting a system where historically high fixed costs, housing and transportation, have eroded the old savings buffers, and insidious discretionary spending lifestyle creep comes in to consume whatever is left.
So we shift now from diagnosis to concrete data-supported solutions. This has to be about financial empowerment, about giving you, the listener, the tactical frameworks to reclaim control.
Because the problem is both systemic and behavioral, the solutions have to be both structural and tactical.
Exactly. And one of the most common solutions you hear about is budgeting. But just listing your expenses in a spreadsheet isn't enough. People need a clear framework.
A way to categorize their spending with intention.
Right. And the sources provide two core budgeting frameworks that really encourage that kind of awareness. The first is the popular, simple, and powerful 50-30-20 framework.
Okay. Can you break down how that framework is supposed to work, especially compared to the brutal pie chart we saw earlier?
The 50-30-20 framework is, for many, an aspirational goal, but it's a critical target to aim for. The idea is to allocate 50% of your take-home pay to needs.
So that's housing, mandatory transportation, groceries, minimum debt payments.
Right, the essentials. Then 30% goes to wants. That's the discretionary lifestyle creep category, dining out, hobbies, entertainment. And the final, crucial 20% goes to savings and debt payoff above the minimums. That's your wealth building bucket.
And the sobering reality is that the average American is currently closer to 70% needs, 20% wants, and maybe 10% or less dedicated to real savings.
Precisely. So to achieve that 50-30-20 target, you have to aggressively attack that 50% needs category. You have to make drastic changes to housing and transportation.
Through geographic arbitrage or house hacking, or by driving a used car.
Exactly. If you can lower your fixed needs from 70% down to 55%, you instantly create more room for that crucial 20% wealth building bucket.
What's the second framework?
The second is a more rigorous, hands-on approach, zero-based budgeting.
This one sounds intense.
It is, but it's incredibly effective. With zero-based budgeting, you have to allocate every single dollar of your income to a specific category. Your income minus all your expenses must equal zero.
So there's no leftover money sloshing around in your checking account.
None. That loose change is what facilitates lifestyle creep. This method forces complete intentionality. Every dollar gets a job, whether its job is rent, groceries, investment, or even a specific fun money category.
So if you earn $5,000, you assign all $5,000. Nothing is left in the void to be spent accidentally.
It's more work, yes. It requires detailed tracking, but it is the ultimate behavioral shield against that silent assassin. You have to consciously decide if that $600 you were losing to creep will instead become $600 assigned to debt avalanche or vacation fund.
The core of all these frameworks and the final synthesis of this deep dive seems to be about the power of compounding these small changes.
It is. The goal isn't just to earn more, because we've established that earning more often just leads to spending more. The real goal is to maximize the spread between what you earn and what you deliberately spend.
And that spread is created by plugging the two biggest leaks, the high fixed cost of housing and transportation, and the insidious behavioral leak of lifestyle creep.
Financial awareness is the root of it all. If you are aware that high fixed costs are forcing you to pay 43% of your net income to rent, you are empowered to make a dramatic choice.
Like moving or house hacking.
And if you are aware that $600 is draining away into random consumption, you are empowered to implement the 48-hour rule and automate your savings to redirect that money. You have to control the percentage, not just the dollar amount.
This deep dive really confirms a hard truth. The average American dollar is battling systemic forces, inflated fixed costs, and the insidious spread of lifestyle creep.
And understanding this complex structure is more than half the battle. The takeaway here is that you're fighting an economic system that makes saving, by default, very difficult. You have to be deliberate, you have to be structural, and you have to be aggressive in protecting your income.
So we've established that the historical 10 to 12% savings rate pretty much disappeared when housing costs climbed from 22% to over 32% of income.
That's the core finding.
So if the data shows that savings rates were highest when housing costs were lowest, here's the final thought for you to mull over. Which strategic trade-off location, through something like geographic arbitrage or aggressive debt reduction like the avalanche method, which of those will give you the greatest immediate financial leverage in our current economy?
It's a question of structural change, and it's different for everyone. But that's the kind of big question you have to ask.
We'll see you on the next deep dive.